Now, this presentation has been thorough and complete, in my opinion, but I wanted to give another example in this appendix of the golden deer episode in ancient stone sculpture rather than medieval painting. This carved stone relief that you can see on this slide, depicting two simultaneous events from the Valmiki Ramayana, should be all too familiar by now. It dates to the Kushan period, which is placing it around the 2nd to 3rd century AD, and comes from ancient Gandhara, located in what used to be northwest India, or what is now modern Pakistan. So this is in the very ancient past compared to the medieval paintings that we've been using for comparison. And also, because Gandhara was near the eastern frontier of the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC, and eventually became part of it under Darius around 520 BC, it is my contention that Indians in that region were the ones who narrated the story of Rama to Ionians and Persians when they came into contact with them, in that second half of the 6th century. And this oral tradition then traveled west to Ionia very quickly due to the fast transportation network within the Persian Empire, which was also vast. That's why they talk about the Royal Road from Susa to Sardis. So it was a very vast and fast transportation network. What is important to note about this particular work of art is that it is one of the oldest sculptures from India that depicts the golden deer hunt as well as the moments before Sita's abduction, where Ravana approaches her. So this work of art is found at the British Museum, and you can see that in the link that I provided here. Now, the British Museum does give us a description of this scene, and they are non-committal, though, about whether the subject is actually the Ramayana. They say that the subject may be a version of the Rama legend or a theme shared with it. So they're not totally sure themselves, but I think as we go through this analysis, I think most people will be certain that it must be, or at least there's a very high probability that it is. So in the middle scene here, the British Museum tells us that an archer, which I believe is Rama, is holding the bow and is ready to strike his quarry, which is the two rearing cervids that are to the left of Rama, and the nearer one is looking over its shoulder. So if we compare to the Caeretan hydria, we can see that there's almost a one-to-one match here, where you have multiple deer again that are being portrayed, but the actual reality is that it's one deer, and it's just moving in a sequence away from Rama. And they're both rearing, meaning that they are standing on their hind legs in a panic. And that is, again, in accordance with what we see in the Caeretan hydria with one of the poses. And they're also showing that one of them is looking over its shoulder, which is, again, the same twisted head that we see in the middle deer of the Caeretan hydria, the middle pose in the Caeretan hydria. So really, it's so close to the Caeretan hydria, and it's also one of the oldest examples from India. So that should really clue us in that this is probably how the Ionian artists really understood it. That this comes the closest to what the Ionian artists were really, picturing or imagining themselves. And you can see that the leftmost cervid is not looking back, and it's fleeing away, and that's, analogous to the leftmost deer that we see on the Caeretan hydria. Now, if we look at the other scene on the left side, Ravan is posing as an unhappy suppliant, in the British Museum's words, and he's approaching Sita, who is seated in a partly leaf covered hut, according to the British Museum. And this hut is what is acting as kind of a dividing line between the two scenes. And also in the rightmost part of the middle scene, we see that Lakshman and Sita are probably the two standing figures behind Rama, who is the archer hunting the deer. So really, I mean, it's again the same, two events: the abduction of Sita and the deer hunt, just as we have seen throughout this presentation, including with the main work of art that we've been analyzing, the Caeretan hydria from Boston. I think this should be as conclusive as it gets.